Today we're going to look at making a credit roll in Media Composer using Titler Pro 6 from NewBlueFX. Now it's interesting, I've seen many posts where people complain how difficult NewBlue Titler Pro is to use for simple titling, and they wish that there was a native titler in Media Composer that could handle Ultra HD 4K titling. And while I understand that may be in the works coming from Avid, I think you can actually get some pretty quick results with NewBlue Titler Pro, but there's some things you have to do to make it as useful. And I'll show you how I make a simple credit roll. Okay, to get started, I'm going to bring in some material to act as a background behind my credit roll. I'll just drag that into the source viewer, and then we'll create a new sequence here. And now I'm just going to Control Y to add an extra track. I'll move the monitor up to the V2 track. With just V2 active, I'm going to place a couple of cuts on this V2 track. So what I'm doing here basically is I'm defining how long I want the credits to run. Now I can select that filler clip, and I'm going to say Add Title. And essentially this puts Media Composer into its effect mode and automatically loads Titler Pro. Now, as I mentioned, this is Titler Pro 6. You can do this same workflow with Titler Pro 5. So one of the first things I'm going to do is simply select the edit text, which is the one and only text element. I'm just going to hit the delete key to get rid of that. And the other key step here is to delete the elastic region. The elastic region is very useful if you have a portion of your title that you want fixed in time and you want to be able to extend that. Essentially, you can think of it as the orange areas are where you would have your animation, and then the green area would be an extendable portion, extendable or contractible on the timeline. So you could stretch your title out, and that would be the portion that was fixed. Now for a title roll, there's no portion of it that's actually fixed, so we're going to delete the elastic region. And you'll notice there are two timelines here, or time codes, that are mentioned. The total duration of this title is 3 seconds, but you can see that the portion that I had selected inside Media Composer was actually 17 seconds and 23 frames. What I'm going to do is make the title itself the same length as the section I have on the timeline. So 17:23. I'll just hit the tab. And now I'll simply zoom out so that I can see the entire timeline. So this represents then the entire length of my credit roll. So now I'll add a new text element, which takes up the entire roll. And to edit the text, you can double click on the text element, and then you've got a little cursor inside it. You can select all. What I've got here is simply some credits that I'm going to copy, and I'll paste into this little block here. Okay. So now I may want to select a different font. So I use under the style, I can select the font for this particular text block. Maybe I want to have some Avengers font. Now in Titler Pro 6, and they may have done this in 5 as well, they rearranged a few things. You will find some tutorials with a quick Google search. You'll find some tutorials that describe this, and the tabs across here are different in Titler Pro 3 and earlier. And at some point, I think it was Titler Pro 5, they actually added that elastic timeline. which we just removed. But it's actually under global here that you'll find the positioning of this text block. So I can move the position around like this. Now, the other thing I can do is, under the global tab, is select the column width. So what was special about this text file was simply that there was a tab after the role and then the actor's name. And that tab results in having basically a column in the middle here. And under the style column, you can select the alignment. So this is kind of nice. Now, one of the things I noticed that I have not yet figured out is how, see, I can select a portion of the text here and perhaps make that larger or smaller or whatever I want to do, maybe put an underline under it, etc. If I select the entire box, so just step out so the entire extent of the box is selected, I can reduce the overall size of the font across the entire text box, and then double click and come back in afterwards and maybe make just the maybe the heading here, I can make that larger. And similarly in production, I could come along and make this 24 point, make that larger. Clicking out so that I've grabbed a hold of the entire box, I can use the alignment tools to center in frame. And one of the criticisms I have, at least with this version, this is the latest version of Titler Pro 6, is for some reason I can't seem to center this particular item within the text box. It's currently set as centered, but that doesn't seem to actually center it in the box. So you could just add some spaces. This is not perfect by any means, but perhaps I want to add some spaces just to more or less center it. Make this one underlined as well. Okay, so now for the actual rolling part of it. I like to use keyframes. It makes it actually considerably easier to take full control over the motion. So what I'll do is, first you have to activate keyframes. So click outside the box and say, just select turn on keyframing. It automatically creates a keyframe at the beginning. I'm not going to move that, but I will simply click here. It actually draws the cursor to the location of the keyframe. And it's at this point that I'm going to move the Y position just below the screen. And actually, for the duration of this title, I'm going to come in about half a second here and add another keyframe. And then roughly half a second before the end of this title, I will add a final keyframe and simply reposition so that the title has moved up off the top. Now at this point, I'm simply going to close and tell Titler Pro to keep this. Now, if you're using a very recent version of Media Composer, see, that's very nice. Here's my title. I'll warn you that you should probably go into settings under the media cache and make sure that your current video caching is actually disabled. So make sure these are both unchecked. The reason for that is there's a bug between the cache frames from Media Composer and the rendering in NewBlue Titler Pro. You'll actually get some glitchy frames. It'll be basically a stale cache. So I turn it off while I'm working with titles. And you can see that you get a nice title roll here, all the way up off the top of the screen at the end. Now, if I decided later on that I wanted to make this title shorter, you'll see immediately that we have a problem. So it doesn't automatically change the size, but it's actually fairly easy to repair. I can select Add Edit. It will immediately take me back into the titler. You can see that the new length is 14.5 frames. And it was 1723, so I can actually take this keyframe, bring it down, and I just want to bring it down below the point where I'm going to shorten this, and I can then just type in 14 and 5. Okay, that becomes the end, and then I can bring this back up a little bit. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't chop off the end of it and lose that keyframe. And once I've done that, of course, now it's comes off the top. I can close this Titler Pro 6, return to Media Composer, and there we are. So that's pretty great. Now, I don't want to get into anything too complex here, but one of the things that I thought was pretty cool about this is you can add effects on top of this if you wish. Okay, make sure you've got your particular title block selected. And again, under Effects and Filters, I'll go for Spotlight here. If you just hover over the effect, you'll get a preview of what that effect does. So I'm going to try the sword slice. And I can just take that. You can either double click on it or just drag it over onto your block. And you can see now that there's actually a little disclosure triangle here. It shows you that you have the spotlight effect. I'm just going to shrink down the library again here, because under the Effects tab now for this particular block, you can see that we've got the spotlight. And I'll just move this along so that I've got my title across the width here. I think the shape's okay, but I'd like to feather this out quite a bit more. I want to bring this way out. Okay, so I can see the vast majority of the title. Let's have a look and see what that looks like. I'm just going to keep that change. We'll come back into Media Composer. Now, quite honestly, once I have the title more or less the way I'd like it, I certainly can re-enable the cache here. And that will let me play through this. Basically, I'll use the J, K, and L keys. Go back and forth a couple of times, and that will actually cache the result, and I'll get pretty good real-time playback. Anyway, I think I'm going to end the tutorial here. There are some tweaks that we can do. You can use this same effect with multiple text blocks at the same time and get some very interesting results. But this is just a very simple, quick and dirty, there's your credit roll. Thanks for watching. I hope this was useful.